All right, welcome to our instructional programs Q&A today. We are happy to be here with you and be able to answer some of the questions that you have, particularly around the survey that we just recently sent. Tonight's message will be recorded. That way, if you're unable to stay for the entire meeting, or if you know someone who wasn't able to join us, you may direct them to the website to learn more. And we'll jump right in. Today, our agenda includes this welcome. So welcome and thank you so much for giving us your time this afternoon. And we are going to talk about what to expect on the K-5 survey. And if you've already opened the survey, you know what some of those questions are, and we'll walk through what we're asking for both K-5 and 6-8. In addition to that, we have something new to share with you, which is the COVID-19 safety tree that just came out yesterday. Last week. And we also have our MVSD student handbook that we will be sharing out with all of you following today's meeting as well. In addition to that, we'll be talking about the scenarios, which you've already seen, as to what we will do in different occasions where there are COVID cases or suspected COVID cases. And then we'll finish up with the questions and answers to everything that we received prior to the meeting today. So we'll go ahead and jump in, and Julie Harris, our Director of Student Services, will walk you through the new decision tree for schools.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for being here with us. We're happy to share our current information that we have with you and to answer your questions this evening. So this decision tree was put out with the guidance of the Marine Health and Human Services Department. And so this will be a decision tree that can be used for schools, but it's very helpful for parents as well. And this will be coming out in our newsletter this week. So I'll just take you through real quickly. Like, for example, if a child has some common symptoms, like a stuffy or runny nose, body aches, fatigue, or lethargy, the siblings in the household context do not need to stay home and quarantine. Parents may want to call the healthcare provider, and the healthcare provider would then guide the families to an alternate diagnosis or perhaps to schedule a COVID-19 test. If an alternate diagnosis is found, then the school receives communication from the healthcare provider that the student may return to school, and the student may come to school after the symptoms improve and fever-free for greater than 24 hours, and no meds or reduced meds. A more common symptom of COVID that might be found in students when we return to in-person learning, in the middle column you can see fever of 100 degrees, chills, sore throat, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, loss of taste or smell, headache, diarrhea, vomiting. The siblings in the household contacts must stay home or will be sent home if a student has those symptoms. At that point, you would schedule a COVID-19 test, or if you are not tested for COVID-19, you treat as positive. So then it would be the test or 10, which goes into remaining students that test or 10. Students or staff with any one of these common symptoms of COVID-19 must be tested or stay at home and isolate for 10 days. And you can follow the chain in the middle all along. If the student tests positive for COVID-19, isolate and stay home for 10 days from time of symptoms started until asymptomatic and fever-free. The siblings and the household contacts stay home and quarantine from all activities for at least 14 days, unless the student was quarantined. And the final kind of pathway in the purple is if a child or a student has close contact with someone who is tested positive for COVID-19, that means close contact is spent 15 minutes or more within 6 feet of an infected person, with or without a mask, or lives in the same household. The siblings in the household do not need to stay home if the student in question can be quarantined. If the student cannot be quarantined, the siblings do need to remain home. Quarantine is you stay home from all activities for at least 14 days since the last contact with the COVID positive person. And again, you can schedule a COVID-19 test. And if the results are not, let's say, test 5 to 7 days after the last contact with the positive case, and if the student develops symptoms, then you must complete the 14-day quarantine. So this is just a really handy decision tree for schools, but it also can be very helpful for parents. So we hope that you make sure to take time to check your child before they come to school when we do return to in-person learning on November 30th. And next, we're going to take a look at our Mill Valley School District Health and Safety Guide. And I don't know, Erin, if you want to jump in on this one or if you want me to take it.
Sure, it's up on the website now, and then I think it's going to go out in the parent newsletter this coming Friday. But this is our district-wide COVID health and safety guide. It was built in conjunction with the Marin County Office of Education guide and in partnership with Health and Human Services. And there is going to be a webinar. I think there's probably a slide coming up about it, but Dr. Santora will be hosting a parent Q&A regarding the health and safety guidelines, if you're interested in that.
Great.
All right, we'll go to the next slide here. I wanted to draw your attention to another presentation that's happening tomorrow from MCOE with Dr. Santora. She is having a community conversation. She is our Deputy Public Health Officer, and she'll be walking through that decision tree information and the student and family handbook information. And so you're able to see what we have here locally in Mill Valley School District, and then she'll be speaking to our entire community in Marin County around those 2 new documents that are available. So this information will be up on our website tomorrow so that you can follow that link and make sure to join that call tomorrow at 4:30. We'll go to the next slide. Here is the scenario information, and we've shared this several times and quite a while ago. And this information does help us know how to handle different cases or incidents when there are COVID positive or COVID suspected cases. And so the first one is if someone has one of those temperatures or in the middle of the chart that Julie just read through, more of the common issues with related to COVID. What would happen in that case is that the school or the classroom would remain open, but your child should be speaking with your doctor or from there understanding whether a COVID test is the best course of action. The scenario 2 is something that we've had a couple times in our district as well. This has been when someone has been in close contact with someone who has tested positive. Again, in that scenario, the school and the classroom does remain open, but that person, whether it's a staff member or a student, does need to remain home and go under the care of their doctor, which would perhaps include a COVID test or quarantine for themselves based on their doctor's recommendation. If a test is negative or if the person is negative for COVID, we would then go to scenario 4, scenario 3, no, 4, I was right on the first time. And in a negative case, the school would remain open. In both the scenario 2 and the scenario 4, anyone related to that student or staff members cohort would be getting notified. So you would get a notification at scenario 2 that we were looking at a student who was following up with their medical care, and we would keep you posted. The scenario 4, we would send you a letter and say it's all clear. A scenario 3 would be is if the person, staff member or student in scenario 2 was positive, we would then take the course of action of closing that classroom or that cohort for 14 days. And so you would of course be notified of that as well. Anytime a school has 5% of the members of that school, staff or students who are positive for COVID, it would then close the entire school. So that's good information for us to know as we get closer to returning to our classrooms and knowing what to expect in different scenarios. We'll go to the next slide. Nicole is going to speak to us about the surveys that you received this week and the information that we're taking from those.
Good morning or good evening, everyone. This week, we really wanted to make sure that we got our surveys out to our families so we could gather the information that we need to make our decisions going forward. So the intended purpose of these are to gather the information on how our current distance learning is going, to request from the K-5 whether we're requesting in person or the extended distance learning. And from 6 to 8, we really want to get a preliminary idea of how many of our students are looking to go into our extended distance learning program. We also want to be able to provide our families in the K-5 sector with information regarding what EDL is going to look like. When we collect all of this data, what we're going to be using it for is to assign our students to classes, refine our student cohorts, inform some of our future decision making, and really improve our communication with our community. On the 6-8 side of things, this is actually the information we're going to be using as we start to develop and select the hybrid option that we're going to go with moving forward. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get to some of those burning questions that you guys have for us and have submitted ahead of time. And so we started with just kind of some of the general questions that we have.
So the first question that we have in the general category is, why aren't we open yet?
So this is one of the big questions that we get because we know that a lot of our families and our students are very anxious and excited to be returning to the classroom and to be seeing their teachers and their classmates in person. And we are really excited about that as well. However, we want to ensure that we have staffing for all of our various groups that are coming back. And we also want to make sure that we have the right amount of time for our students to transition for classrooms that might be combined and teachers that might be changed. And so that's why we've planned this out for a November 30th opening.
Will school principals and classroom teachers get to see the answers we provide on the latest survey?
Yes, we're going to be sharing our data with all of our teachers and our administrators. We also are going to be posting it on our website, and we're going to be going over this data in our various working groups as we put the final details together for coming back to school.
Will elementary and middle school students be on the same 2.5-hour schedule? Will my elementary child and my middle school child be on the same AM and PM schedule?
And this is a really great question as well. And right now we don't know because we don't actually know what the schedule is going to look like at the middle school. So at the middle school, we're not sure if it is going to be an AM PM schedule. And so at this time, we don't have that information.
Okay, the next category is EDL or extended distance learning questions. And the first question, some families made plans around being able to opt back into in-person at 6-week intervals, such as caring for family members. Is there a way to appeal or apply for exceptions?
Yeah, and so, the purpose of EDL is for our families who intend to quarantine for medical reasons. And so we know that during this time, we need to make sure that our staffing is accurate for our various programs. And so because of that, we are asking for a commitment for the remainder of the school year into our EDL or in-person program.
Will children in EDL retain their spots at their home school next fall?
Yes, we are keeping all of our students in their home schools and their spot will be saved.
Will students and families in EDL continue to receive all communications from and invitations to participate in community events at their own home school, even if their EDL group consists of students from other schools?
And that's one of the great things about keeping them in their home school and connected and keeping their spot. They will be on all of the communications that go out to families. So they will be able to get the information about any of those events. And they'll also get communication from their EDL teachers as well through Parent Square.
How many teachers will be supporting EDL? Are they current teachers or new to the role?
And for this question, we really don't have a concrete answer for you yet because we don't have our final EDL numbers until our survey closes. And so how many of our students officially opt into it will determine the answers to these questions.
How many students will be in each EDL class, and how many classes will have multiple grades?
And for this, we are capping our EDL classes at 30 or less, and many will be less. But we do not know about the general makeup of all of those classes yet, because again, we are waiting for our final EDL numbers to make sure that we have them all placed appropriately.
The next category is travel and holiday questions. Can we choose to return in January if we are worried about travel during the holidays?
No, school will begin on November 30th. And so we are asking that you make your arrangements for travel to also be really mindful of this time of year with COVID and be able to return in enough time to monitor for symptoms or to quarantine your family if you are traveling.
What requirements or expectations/recommendations will the district make for families to self-quarantine and or get tested after travel?
The district will recommend that families follow all of the county health guidelines for travel. And so there are no general restrictions on travel at this time, but all of the county health guidelines are ever changing and ever responsive to our current environment. And so we ask that you continue to monitor that.
If families travel and then must quarantine for 2 weeks, how do our children catch up with their classes?
If a child misses school, they would receive assignments as they do now when they miss school. And so again, we ask that you be mindful of the breaks and time away from school or activities that you're involved in outside of school. We sent a pledge to all of our families this last week, and we really want you to think about pledging and committing to being part of the positive community of learners in your child's classroom and thinking about different decisions and choices that you can make to help make sure our entire community stays safe during this time.
Would you consider allowing students to do distance learning through January 15th and then do in-person learning?
For us to set up our distance learning classes, we really want to focus on continuity of learning for the rest of the year. And so we want our teachers to be able to get to know their students in this next trimester and be able to finish with those students through the year. And so it's really important that our teachers and our students are connected to one another and to their classmates. And so, no.
Can we choose to continue distance learning if we have to travel extensively to see family?
We are asking that those who choose distance learning are those who are choosing to quarantine either for a family member or their self.
Why would we not wait until after winter break to return to in-person?
We know that in-person learning is really important in our community, and we are prepared to open our schools.
Next category is illness and contact quarantining. If we opt for in-person learning and our child gets sick or was possibly exposed to someone with COVID, can we join EDL for that time period, or will a child miss 2 weeks of school? How can the child stay connected to learning when they may have to stay home for days or up to a week?
Thanks for that question. In fact, we've talked about this this evening with the chart. So people should definitely go back to the flow chart and determine what is appropriate for your child in terms of self-quarantining. If a student is self-quarantining, they will get their lessons from their in-person teacher. They cannot go back and forth in and out of EDL.
Why can't we allow a Zoom window into the classroom?
Well, we really want to ensure that all students receive direct instruction and support, and the teacher would not be able to effectively check in with students on Zoom and their classroom at the same time. And so the students on Zoom would not be able to clearly see all of the things happening in the classroom throughout the day.
COVID cases protocol questions. What is the protocol for closing schools due to COVID cases?
I was still on mute, sorry about that. So the protocol is that if we have 5% of our student or our population in general test positive for COVID within a 2-week time frame, then we will have to close that campus for the 14-day quarantine period. If 25% of our schools are closed due to a 5% threshold being met, then we do have to shut down the district for that 14-day period.
What if we are only interested in the in-person hybrid if the county is in the orange or yellow tier, but not the purple or red?
At this time, we are asking our families to make their commitment in the next 2 days to either extended distance learning or in person. And so those are going to be our commitments until the end of the school year.
If COVID improves so that the county and district allow classrooms to return to their normal pre-COVID state with full class sizes, will you allow EDL students to return to the classroom?
And with this question, it's really similar to a lot that we've answered. At this time, we really do need, for the consistency of our classes and for our staffing, and to make sure that we're providing the best education to our students and our stability, we have to ask our families to go ahead and opt in for the rest of the school year.
What is the threshold to return to full class sizes? Why can't students go full day now?
So currently, we still have restrictions on physical distancing in the county. And if those restrictions on physical distancing do go away, then that'll be the time when we can start talking about returning to a full return. But as long as we have physical distancing requirements, we will not be able to bring back all of our students at once.
And what are the protocols for testing?
Oh, Kimberly, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. So all of our staff are now on a quadrant schedule, which means that 25% of our staff are testing every 2 weeks. And so it's a surveillance testing that we have in place. Also, prior to the first day back at the campus, all staff members have also tested. And so we will be monitoring that throughout the whole year with the surveillance testing. Today as well, we have started a mail program that has been available to us through CISC. We have many staff members who have signed up to receive the test in the mail to their home. And then they will return it through FedEx and get their results within 5 days. This is not for someone who is symptomatic, but rather for the surveillance testing, so that we'll have a very good monitor if there happens to be a case at any of our sites and an outbreak. In addition to that, we are happy to speak with parents if it is something that our community wants to do together. There are no requirements through the CDC or our county health office for children's vaccination or testing requirement around this, but we would be happy to explore that perhaps through our PTAs to find out if parents would like to opt into something like that.
Okay, staffing logistics questions. Did the EDL teachers volunteer, or are they simply being reassigned due to budget?
I was on mute, sorry about that. So our EDL teachers have volunteered and some have been reassigned, and we will be finalizing this data though once we have all of our final numbers from the survey that was just put forward. And we do know that the survey is a little bit different because by asking families to commit for the rest of the year, we understand that that's a different decision. And as soon as we get that data, we will be sharing that with our community. We will plan to inform all of our families as to who their teacher is by October 30th. So as we finish getting the information this week, we will work on putting our classroom together and identifying exactly which teachers will be needed for our programs.
Why are the substitutes replacing the classroom teachers as opposed to hiring the substitutes for EDL?
We are honoring requests of our teachers who would like to teach remotely. And so we are looking at that as the first option for filling those positions. And we will be also using substitutes in our schools for any of our staff for regular absences as well.
How has the union been involved and/or affected the return to in-person learning date and delays?
All changes in working conditions are negotiated with our union, including this current plan for our students to receive in-person support now, starting last week, all the way through November 20th. and our return on November 30th. And so our conversations have been in collaboration and cooperation with our unions. In addition to that, we have been working in our working teams with our teachers to make sure that we have the best, most up-to-date information out to all of our families. We're also preparing right now to do the safety orientations here in November, and plans are already underway to have students on campus for that as well. We know students who are in need of in-person learning right now have started coming onto our sites as well.
Okay, moving on to K-5 questions. Will siblings still be assigned to the same AM/PM cohort for in-person learning?
Siblings will be assigned to the same AM/PM cohort for in-person learning in the same school, and middle school staff will work with families who have children in another school.
If a child has an IEP and splits their time between general education and the Learning Center, how will their in-person placement be determined?
So for that question, we'd encourage anyone to work directly with their child's case manager because all of those services will be individualized. But the staff has been working on extended day for some students so that they can access the full 2.5 hours of their gen ed cohort, but then be on campus longer than that. So they can also receive their special education services in person and not have that impact their time in gen ed as well. But again, we'd encourage everyone to reach out to their case manager because that is an individualized decision for each student to meet their needs.
When will we find out if our teachers will be in person or teaching EDL?
We will be informing all families of their AM/PM placement and EDL by October 30th.
What is the maximum number of students allowed for in-person if classrooms are combined?
The maximum number of students allowed for in-person if the classrooms are combined depends on the grade level, but K through 3, it will be 12 maximum for AM, 12 for PM, and 4th and 5th will go up to 14, but most likely around 12 as the maximum number.
Okay, curriculum and teaching questions. Will there be more physical activity in PE? I have noticed kids doing other activities such as Jeopardy or word games that aren't physical.
The frequency of PE programming will change when we move into the hybrid model. Please reach out to your PE teacher and with questions or concerns that you have about your students' experience.
Will EDL and hybrid students receive the same curriculum?
Yes, the curriculum is determined by the teachers just as it is now, and all students will be taught the same standards. And the teacher will determine the curriculum, and EDL students will get all of the instruction and materials that they need.
If long-term subs are backfilling classrooms, what structures are in place for them to be successful and ensure that they stay for the remainder of the year?
Well, the principals are working very closely with the grade level teams to support long-term substitute teachers to ensure programmatic continuity. And it's the similar process that we use when a staff member goes out on a medical leave. We ensure that the long-term sub gets all of the support that they need for curriculum instruction and student success.
For students in EDL, what happens to their Seesaw, Freckle, Epic, or other accounts associated with their original teacher? Will they maintain access for continuity?
Students in EDL will have access to the accounts that their EDL teacher sets up for them. So if it's a Seesaw account, then the EDL teacher sets up the Seesaw account, they will have access to that. There may be a little bit of shifting with programs that the teachers use, just like it is now, because teachers get to select the curriculum and the applications that their students use. But we're trying to maintain as much continuity as we can for students and learning.
Are the new substitutes teaching EDL or replacing current teachers in the classroom and the current teachers teach EDL?
As of now, in our K-5, the long-term substitutes will be replacing current teachers in the classroom. Once we get more data about the middle school, we'll have more of an idea of what that looks like.
In other districts, teachers are teaching in person in the morning and then online live Zoom classes in the afternoon as needed. What is the hurdle or concern about our teachers doing this?
These are two different modes of teaching, and we have agreed with our staff that we will use their planning time to ensure high levels of rigorous learning within one modality. And so when we go to in-person learning, it will be that.
If our highest priority is to keep our current teacher, what should we say on the survey to show we want this? Will our comments be taken into account?
We have wonderful teachers here in Mill Valley, and in order to balance classes, we do not take requests for teachers in any circumstance. We are gathering the survey data and will be able to provide our community with more concrete data around some of these conflicting factors that make our decisions this year incredibly challenging.
What happens if there's a spike in COVID numbers locally? Will students return to distance learning? Will EDL be returned? EDL students be returned to their original teacher or remain separate?
We will follow the scenario flow chart for any spikes. And so if a school has to shut down at the 5% level, students would go into distance learning with their teachers at that time with their current teachers.
Will students in EDL have any opportunity for connection with their original teacher or solely the EDL teacher?
They would then be connected to their new EDL teacher for the remainder of the year.
Procedures and schedules. What are the bathroom procedures for kindergarten? How are bathrooms cleaned and ventilated? And how can you consider cohorts separate if they're sharing a bathroom?
Great, thanks. Use of a restroom does not compromise our cohorts. A definition of a cohort is a stable group of individuals. So students at all grade levels will be using restrooms while on campus. The number of students allowed in the restroom at one time will be limited. Restrooms will be cleaned between AM and PM cohorts. Doors and windows will be open where practicable to provide air circulation.
Will the EDL schedule match the in-person schedule? And when will the in-person schedule be available to parents?
The EDL schedule is similar to the remote learning schedule that is now in place. The AM/PM schedule will be sent out by the administrators on or before October 30th.
Will there be additional time allotted for lunch, breaks, or socially distanced recess, or are parents expected to drop off and then pick up 2.5 hours later?
All students on campus will be interacting and working with peers as well as moving around the classroom while maintaining the recommended social distancing guidelines where practicable. All students will have a 15-minute recess during their in-person session. Parents must drop off and pick up their students promptly.
If we choose K-5 in person and at some point feel it is not safe, what are our options to move to distance learning?
We understand that this is a big decision, but we're really trying to ask families to make the decision now, whether they're going to remain in extended distance learning or go to the AM/PM hybrid. We need to do this for the continuity of learning as we have explained.
Middle school, grade 6 to 8 questions. How will the total synchronous instructional minutes in the hybrid options compare with the total in our current distance learning program?
So first I want to say that we really do appreciate all of the questions that have come in about the various hybrid options. I want to make sure that we understand that none of these hybrid schedules are the chosen schedule. They are all just a variety of options that we are considering as we design what coming back to school in person is going to look like. So when we're talking about synchronous instructional minutes in a hybrid option, since we are having to limit it to half of our student body at a time, we are going to see a decrease in those live synchronous minutes by about 50%. The total instructional time, including our asynchronous minutes though, will not change from current.
How many minutes will be spent learning on campus, and what will be sacrificed to return minutes, elective, small group, or others?
So this will have some variety depending on the final model that we choose, but in total, we'll probably have about 6 hours and 40 minutes on campus per week for each student. And this is what it's going to sacrifice is it does reduce the number of those synchronous minutes that we have with our students with our teachers currently on Zoom, because our teachers will be teaching the curriculum to 2 groups of students. There will be more asynchronous work in that time.
Why can't we just bring back students identified as struggling with distance learning and not disrupt all students, especially with teacher changes?
And so we are currently bringing back small groups of students who might require additional support, or who distance learning might not be the most effective environment for them. But we know that there are many more students who also want to return, and we want to be able to provide that opportunity for all of our students.
How will electives be managed? Will some be eliminated?
We are striving to create a system where those electives will be maintained for most of our students. However, for our our EDL, our extended distance learning program, we may not be able to maintain all of the same electives.
How do each of the proposed hybrid formats impact or change each student's current schedule, teachers, and classmates?
Okay, so this is slightly complicated, but basically by changing to a hybrid method, there is going to be a little bit of a disruption to our students' schedules. And it could be a very minimal disruption, and in some cases, a student might have more of a disruption. Our goal is to really keep that at a minimum as much as possible. As we shift teachers to become EDL teachers, we will have to balance classes. So there will probably be a number of student schedule changes in order to do that. And then obviously, if a teacher is moving to EDL, we will have to replace the teaching in that classroom. So there will be some disruptions to their current schedule and their teachers, but it should be as minimal as we can make it.
Is it okay to do a 3-by-3 model where there isn't math or science engagement for 6 weeks?
The 3-by-3 is one of the models that we are considering in our working group. And we know that there may be some students whose schedule makes one chunk of time much more work intensive than another. And we're willing to look in those situations and make adjustments as necessary to make sure that students aren't overwhelmed during those time periods.
And why isn't the 3-by-3 model 3 classes for 3 weeks instead of 3 classes for 6 weeks?
And at this time, we're really considering all options. So this is definitely going to be something that we bring back to the working team as we start looking at the details. And we can discuss whether a 3-week might be one of the options we want to consider.
If the goal for middle school is to reduce mixing between students and teachers, why is the 6 classes per day, 2-day-a-week model being proposed?
You know, we ask a number of questions on our survey, and one of them is what your priority is. And we do know that for a lot of students or in families, a priority is being able to maintain all 6 of their classes throughout the day. And so we wanted to not leave anything off the table as we engage in these discussions. And so we wanted to make sure we presented this as well so we could get some feedback.
How will social interaction occur in a hybrid model?
Much like it would occur in a typical class, although distanced, when students do come into the classroom, they will be able to talk to one another. They will be able to hear each other's thoughts and have those unique conversations that kind of happen in an in-person classroom environment.
Will there be opportunities for small groups of students to work collaboratively or one-to-one time with their teachers?
I don't have the specifics for that at this time, but there are definitely going to be opportunities as needed for our students and our teachers to be able to work well or have interventions as necessary. There will likely be office hours scheduled that will also provide opportunities for that.
What does keeping the same schedule mean? What changes to schedules should students expect in each plan?
Keeping the same schedule means having the same 6 classes that our students are enrolled in right now. So when we ask if that's one of your priorities, it means you might not want to switch, having English first thing in the morning for math instead. So we're just trying to get a sense of how our families and our students feel about various changes in schedules. Anytime we bring students back, whether it be at the beginning of the school year or now it's almost like the beginning of the school year again, there's always going to be a balancing that has to happen, and there are going to be some changes. And so we know that there's going to be some disruption to student schedules, and we're just trying to get a sense of what our community's priorities are in that line.
How will air quality be addressed? Will fresh air be cycled through constantly?
Kimberly, do you have?
Yes, I just typed that in there for you. Every classroom will have an air purifier. And so we have more information on the air purifiers that we sent in our last update. And when we post this question and answer, we'll make sure to give that to you as well. But every single classroom will have an air purifier.
What would the in-person schedule look like for the 2 days in-person hybrid model with all 6 classes versus the 5 days in person with the 3x3 model?
And I'm just going to give a general idea because, again, I want to specify that we don't have the details of all of these schedules worked out. The 2-day 6 classes model really looks like a very similar to what we're doing right now in distance learning. It is it's a larger chunk schedule. So you will only go to a couple of your classes per day. In that model, you would only see your teacher in person for that particular class 1 day a week. In the 5-day model, an AM/PM type schedule on a 3x3, you would have much smaller or shorter class periods, but you would get to attend them every day of the week. So either in the morning or in the afternoon, but they would be reduced to maybe 45-minute, 40 to 45 minute class periods, most likely.
How would you split periods work by the 3x3 model?
Again, these are details that we're going to be working out, but the most obvious split would probably be a 1 through 3 and then a 4 through 6 schedule.
How will asynchronous learning be improved by the hybrid model? Currently, asynchronous time is really only teacher office hours rather than additional learning.
We will need to work on providing more robust asynchronous assignments for our students during the non-in-person days because they don't have the ability to be on those synchronous Zoom lessons. And so we will need to revamp a little bit how those look and make sure that we are providing a lot of the instructional pieces that students can do, much like a flipped classroom kind of model, where students at home can maybe watch a recorded lesson or lecture and then do some assignments with it.
What would be the best learning option for a middle school student whose top goal is to continue with their current teachers?
We are striving to maintain our class schedules as much as we can, but we can't guarantee it. It's going to depend on how many of our students are requesting EDL and the number of teachers that we're going to need for that. So unfortunately, I don't have a concrete answer to this. I would say that you will likely have the least amount of disruption to your schedule in the in-person hybrid model.
Why can't we keep core classes via distance learning and offer electives like PE in person to address social interaction?
Currently, our working group is considering all options in order to provide for a safe reopening for both students and staff.
How will current teachers and student relationships be maintained?
At this point, we would want our students to continue the relationship that they have with their current teachers. And if some of their teachers do change, we would like to embrace the opportunity to build new relationships with those teachers.
And what do teachers and counselors believe are most important for middle school students to continue learning and growing, such as in-person opportunities, instructional minutes, teacher-student relationships? How is their input being considered?
I think this question has so many parts to it, and I would hesitate to try to speak for all of our teachers and our counselors. But I do want to say that we have a very large working group that has come together to discuss these very things. And part of our conversation every week is really on what is best for students. And I think what we've come up with in the end is what is best for each individual student is often very different, but we do know that we need to support them in a variety of ways, both academically, social, emotionally, and just building those strong relationships that they don't necessarily have. And some of our students can build those relationships very well in a distance learning on Zoom, hanging out with their friends virtually in those manners, and other of our students cannot. And that's why we really wanted to make sure we sent out this survey, because we can get a lot of this information before we hammer down the details of what we're going to provide or offer for our in-person learning starting November 30th.
Thank you all for your questions. We do appreciate you taking the time to send those questions to us. We will make sure to post these and the answers online, as well as this video recorded message today. And we invite you to join us for the community conversation with Dr. Santora tomorrow at 4:30. And then on Wednesday, we do have an LCAP meeting from 3:30 to 4:30. And again, online. Great opportunities to be able to come together and to hear what's going on. We know many of you have been attending your PTA meetings as well and talking to your teachers. Thank you for filling out the survey, and take care.